Here we go. Okay, so last week we started off with a sort of an introductory explanation of what the Tikunei Zohar is. We're studying the Tikunei Zohar now. We sort of gave an introductory explanation where it came from, who wrote it, how it came to be written, and so on and so forth. I did forget to mention that in the years that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the Rashbi as he's known, when he was in the cave hiding away from the Roman authorities, that's when he wrote the vast bulk of the Zohar. There were other parts that were added later from some of his teachings by his students and students of his students and so on, very much similar to the way the Talmud was written. The Talmud was written in a similar kind of a way that was written over a period of generations. But the bulk of the Zohar, or the what's called the Chabura Kadmita, the Zohar refers to it as the original document, or the original Chibura means text, the original text, right? So the original text was compiled by Rabbi Shimon, and that was the basis of the teachings of Kabbalah for all generations. In fact, to a certain extent, the Zohar is called, in a sense, the Bible of Kabbalah, right? Because it is the sort of the foundational book of modern Kabbalah. But in any event, that's how it came to be written. Now, the Tikunei Zohar, as we explained last time, is various explanations, in fact, 70 explanations of the first word of the Torah, Bereshit. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Bereshit, in the beginning. Now, before we actually get on to the Tikkunim themselves, there's an introduction, a very important introduction to the Zohar, and one which, to the Tikunei Zohar, and one which has in itself some of the secrets of the teaching of the Zohar. But before we even get to that section, which I want to look at in depth, which is called Patach Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, began his discourse. Why? Because Elijah was the teacher of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in the cave. When he was in the cave, he was visited on a regular basis, even on a daily basis, by Elijah the prophet, who is the keeper of the secrets. Now, interestingly enough, the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, many generations later, in the 1500s, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai lived in the 2nd century. So in the 1500s, that's 1300 years later approximately, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria's teacher was also Elijah the prophet. However, the Baal Shem Tov, who lived in the 1700s, 1700 to 1760, the Baal Shem Tov, his teacher was Achia HaShiloni. Achia Shiloni is one of the other prophets mentioned in the prophets, the section of the of scripture which is called the prophets, Nevi'im, and he was said to be the teacher of Elijah. So about Elijah and Achia, it said that they are the keepers of the keys. The keepers of the keys to the secrets of the Torah. And that's why Elijah, in the case of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and in the case of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, presented these teachings, taught these secret teachings to Rabbi Shimon and to the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria. And later on, Achia taught the Baal Shem Tov. Now, this in itself is a very important idea, because how is it that the teachings are transmitted? Where did they come from? They didn't simply come from, this is like transcendent knowledge. It's not knowledge that comes to a person by studying texts and making comparisons. Yes, that can deepen his understanding of things, but the initial teaching has to be presented from a level beyond the text itself, as we will discuss shortly. And that is in fact what Elijah and Achia, these two keepers of the secrets, what their job, so to speak, was. In order to be able to teach the people that they taught, how did they appear to them? So it seems that the way they appeared to them was not so much as angels. Let me just explain that there are 4 levels of what is called Ruach HaKodesh, 4 levels of divine inspiration, 5 levels of divine inspiration, not 4, 5. 5 levels of divine inspiration. I mentioned this before a number of times. I've explained it elsewhere, so I'm just going to go over it very briefly here for those of you who are not familiar, or those of you who forgot, or whatever. 5 levels of Ruach HaKodesh, of divine inspiration. The lowest level of divine inspiration is called what is sometimes revealed to some people in dreams. What can be revealed in dreams. Now, a person does not necessarily have to be on any lofty spiritual level to have ideas revealed to them in dreams. In fact, we find that Pharaoh, who was a pretty decadent person, Pharaoh at the time of the enslavement of the Jews in Egypt, and even prior to that, in the time of Joseph, when Joseph was in Egypt, we find that Pharaoh also had dreams. And those dreams were interpreted, those ones were interpreted by Joseph, and they were prophetic dreams. Later on, also in the time of Pharaoh, in the time of Moses, and the children of Israel who left Egypt, he also had some prophetic dreams as to what was going to occur, as is explained in the Zohar itself. Same is true with Sancherib and various others, and Prophet Daniel interpreted the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar and so on. So there are many, many people who were even evil people who had prophecies revealed to them in dreams. So that's the lowest level of prophecy, the lowest level of divine inspiration. The next level up is a level which is called a Magid. No, I'm sorry. The next level up is called the level of one level of Eliyahu Hanavi, when Elijah comes to a person not to teach him something, but to save him from a certain situation, to rescue him from a certain situation. You might not even know that he's been rescued by Elijah the prophet. Elijah may come in some disguised form and rescue the person. I happen to know one person who is convinced that that's what happened to him. He was a child at the time of the Holocaust, and he was in one of the prison camps, and they were taken out on a death march. He was a child, and he was still a young teenager before the age of 18. He was like 14, 15, and they were taken out on a death march, and they were marching through freezing weather, very, very cold, snow everywhere, and he fell. Now, he fell, he tripped, he was exhausted, and he tripped over his own feet, and he was walking, with not exactly winter clothing, just had pajamas on, basically, and very light kind of slippers, whatever. In any event, he fell, and then this German soldier who was endowed with a German shepherd, a dog, an Alsatian dog, and usually if anyone fell in the snow, they'd just stick the dogs on them or they shot them. So anyway, he fell in the snow, and this German soldier picked him up, and he gave him some of his coffee, which was unheard of. And this happened several more times, and he managed somehow to survive. And the soldier was walking next to him the entire time. He turned around for one moment when they heard the sounds of another army coming. It was in fact the Russian army was coming. And he turned around to see if he could see who was coming. And then he turned back, and this German soldier completely disappeared. Completely, just disappeared. And didn't seem to have left any trail. He was convinced that this was Elijah. Interesting story, but anyway, Elijah the prophet does appear to people to rescue them from a certain situation. That's the second level of divine inspiration. The third level of divine inspiration is when one gets a private teacher. A teacher who will teach a person some aspect of the Torah, and usually the secrets of the Torah. The most famous one that we know of, besides Elijah, is someone who is called the Magid Meisharim. The Magid Meisharim was a book that was written by the author of the Jewish Code of Law, Rabbi Joseph Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote this book called the Shulchan Aruch, and he also wrote another book called the Magid Meisharim, where he tells of all the incidents. He used to have the spiritual teacher that would come to him on a daily basis and teach him Kabbalah. And he wrote a book of all the teachings that this divine soul told him. He called him the Magid Meisharim. He didn't give him another name. The Magid, the teacher, my teacher. That's the third level of divine inspiration. The fourth level is when the root of a person's own soul becomes revealed to him. In other words, his essence becomes revealed to him, the essence of his soul becomes revealed to him, and leads him to his fullest potential of which he is capable. The highest level, the fifth level, is when the soul of another saintly person, whether dead or alive, actually takes him higher than his own soul root and lets him understand things that in his own comprehension, or lets him experience things that in his own, given the structure of his own soul, he would never have been able to achieve on his own. That is called Ibur Nishmat HaTzadik, when the soul of a tzaddik, a soul of another great saint, whether alive or dead, becomes embedded in his own, or as the expression is, impregnated into his own soul, and leads him to higher than his own soul root. Now, it seems that the teacher, certainly the teacher of the Baal Shem Tov, was this type of revelation. And probably also, although it doesn't state it explicitly, probably also this was the revelation of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Arizal, and the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon by Yochai. In other words, the soul of this prophet came and was imbued within their own soul, was impregnated within their own souls, and led them to the spiritual levels that they achieved. Now, what is the purpose of all this revelation? What is the purpose of teaching them Kabbalah? So they could do magic spells and and that kind of thing? Of course not. The purpose seems to be stated in a cryptic verse that is used in the Tikunei Zohar in a couple of places. This verse states as follows: V'hamaskilim yazhiru kazor harakia. Those who have, let's call it enlightenment, those who are enlightened will shine like the luminousness, the luminosity of the heavens. Let's just say they will shine like the heavens. Those who are enlightened, and the word enlightened itself teaches you what we're talking about here, will shine like the heavens. The word Zohar itself is one of the 7 words for light in the Torah. There are 7 words for light: Or, Noga, Zohar, Bahir, and various others. And all of these words for light indicate or indicative of a different sort of type of light. The word Zohar itself means radiance, essentially. It means radiance. Now, radiance is, it would seem, and this is the way it's explained, the radiance here that we mean over here is not that it's a light which is reflected from elsewhere. It's a light which is radiated from inside that particular being or that particular entity, whatever it is. So hamaskilim, those who are enlightened, will shine forth like the heavens, like the shining of the heavens. That's the kind of glow or the kind of enlightenment that we're talking about by Rabbi Shimon. In other words, it becomes essentially a source of light. Now, whether we mean this literally or we don't mean this literally, that's a whole discussion. But you will see that the artist's representation of a person who is saintly is that he has a sort of halo around him. In fact, the word halo, some people say it comes from the Greek word, which means light, but in truth, it seems to come from a much earlier, much more ancient Hebrew word, which is another one of the words for light, behilo, right? Behilo, the word behilo just has the word hilo or halo in it with a B in front. Behilo means, there's a verse in Job. There's a verse in Job, behilo neiroi ala roishi. Let his candle shine above my head. In other words, let the light of God shine upon me as if it were a candle above my head. So this idea of a person shining, the shiningness, if you could use such an expression of a person, is indicative of an inner light, of an inner enlightenment. And that's how the Zohar actually starts. It actually starts out with this idea. After telling the story of how Rabbi Shimon escaped to the cave in Lod, the first statement of the Tikunei Zohar is Patach v'Omar. He opens up and he says, Rabbi Shimon opened up his discourse, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, opened up, and he says, V'hamaskilim yazhiru kazor harakia. The enlightened will shine like the heavens. Now, what does it mean, the word patach? So the explanation is as follows, and given by the commentaries. He opened up a pipeline. He opened up a channel for others. Whenever the word patach is used, like patach Eliyahu, patach Rabbi Shimon v'Omar, it means that he opened up a channel for divine energy to flow down to those who will receive at the other end of the channel. And that essentially is what this whole concept of Hamaskilim Yazhiru Kazor Harakia. That's what it all, the enlightened will shine with the light of, with the illumination of the heavens. What are the heavens? So it's explained again in the commentaries on the Zohar. They explain that the heavens, the Rakia over here, is the sefirot, the divine emanations of Zeir Anpin, and particularly the sefira of Yesod. Now, Yesod is the, let me just get, I should have put this up on the screen beforehand, but I didn't. Here we go. One second, I'm sorry. Actually, that's not the one I wanted, but all right, good enough. Okay, so here. Oh, let me share screen. Here we go. It's not the diagram I wanted, but it's good enough. Okay, here we go. I got a whole bunch of diagrams of, so I have to prepare them beforehand, otherwise I mess up. All right, you know what? Here's another one. Anyway, the sefira of Yesod is this sefira over here. Let me just explain the following. I'm going to try and annotate this. I don't know if it's going to work. Let's see. Draw. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to work because it's a different document, but it might. Okay, this over here, Keter, as everyone probably knows, is a sefira which transcends all of the sefirot. It's above all of the sefirot. it's not immanent but transcendent. All the other sefirot are immanent. In other words, they shine within, whereas the sefirah of Keter shines upon. It doesn't shine within. So Keter is the highest, the most elevated, the loftiest of the sefirot, and it shines upon with a light that envelops everything equally. It's like the light of the sun itself, as opposed to the light of the sun as is absorbed, let's say, in a process of photosynthesis, right, where it's absorbed into the leaves themselves. So this light is a transcendent light. All the other sefirot represent an immanent light, light within, illumination from within. Okay, so these first sefirot, if we don't count Keter, then we count Da'at. If we count Da'at, we don't count Keter. That's Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at. And I'll explain these probably in the next lesson. We'll go into it in some depth. These sefirot are called the sefirot of consciousness. Or in the Hebrew, it's called mochin or hakara. Mochin means intellectual faculties, but we prefer to call them levels of consciousness. That is super consciousness, Keter, and this is consciousness. This transcends consciousness, it's super conscious, and this is conscious. The rest of them here, these are emotional components, right? The emotions. Chesed is kindness, gevura, awe. This could be love and awe, or kindness and fear, or withdrawal to a certain extent. Tiferet, etc. All of the sefirot. And the final sefirah, the one that we were talking about, the final sefirah of this particular bunch is the one called Yesod. Yesod is the other end of the channel, right? When it says that Rabbi Shimon opened the channel, he opened the channel over here. He opened the channel with Chokhmah, which is also called in ancient Kabbalah. In the old Kabbalah, it's also sometimes called maskil, hamaskilim, those enlightened ones. He opened that channel for the divine energy to flow through down the pipeline, down the system, to the end of the channel, which is called Yesod, which corresponds to the male and female organ, sexual organ, or the organ of procreation. Let's see now, can you get this page down? Yeah, until you get to Malchut. Oops. Okay, until you get to Malchut. Malchut is the recipient. So when it says that Rabbi Shimon opened the channel of enlightenment, he opened the channel in Chokhmah, and it went all the way down to the recipient, who is Malchut. The recipient being Malchut. What am I doing here? Sorry, let me go to the mouse. To the recipient called Malchut. Let's just put Malchut in that box over there. So it goes all the way from Chokhmah, all the way through to Malchut, to the recipient. And this is what Rabbi Shimon was doing. Now, one of the ideas that's explained, as far as this is concerned, is that the light within, the light at the end of the channel, the ideal is when the light at the end of this channel has the same intensity as the light at the beginning of the channel, and even the same intensity, it can even reflect the light which transcends the channel altogether. It can, but that'll only be in the future, not right now. Nevertheless, Kabbalah, or the Zohar itself, actually has its expression, Abba Yesad Brata. Abba Yesad Brata, which means literally the father establishes the daughter. The father establishes the daughter, whereas the mother establishes the son, right? Aim habanim, the mother of sons. Whereas the father is closer to the daughter and the mother is closer to the son, right? This is simply we're talking about in human relationships, in family relationships. Now, of course, it's not always like this, but this is in a general sense. In a general sense, that is the case. It might be different in your personal experience, but that's the way Kabbalah sees it. In any event, Abba Yesad Brata Chochma establishes Malchut. Chochma establishes Malchut. Let me just remove all of these drawings here. Let's see now. How do I remove the drawings? I forget already. Okay, let's see here. Erase. Oh, undo. Here we go. All right, I'm doing all these drawings just to make things a little easier. Okay, fine. So, what we said before was, again, that Abba Yisad Brata. The ideal is that what comes out at the beginning of the channel flows through the channel without interruption and without being reduced in any way, and eventually is revealed within Malchut. Now that's unusual for that to happen because, as you probably know, in a funnel, the lower part of the funnel restricts the flow so that whatever's flowing into the recipient only flows into the recipient in a way that the recipient can actually receive it without being overwhelmed. So it has to go in slowly. Similarly to a child. When a child is very small, you only give him mother's milk, right? Or at best some kind of formula which emulates mother's milk, if not mother's milk. It's only a little bit later when the child starts growing up and maturing and developing a little bit more that he's able to start eating some liquid foods, fruit puree or whatever. Only much later is the child able to start digesting proper foods, whole foods. And even then, only a little bit at a time. Until eventually the person becomes an adult, he's able to enjoy a proper meal, a full meal with all, with all the side dishes and desserts as well. Similarly, in a spiritual sense, a person has to grow slowly. If the illumination would come too quickly, it would basically just blow the vessels apart. It would blow the vessels. It can't be contained in a vessel. The vessel has to be transcended altogether eventually. But the idea is that this flow begins to flow down into Malchut and eventually causes Malchut, the last and the lowest of the sefirot, to rise up to the beginning. To the beginning over here, to Chochma. Right? Abba Yesad Brata. Chochma is the one that establishes Malchut, so that eventually Malchut rises up to its root in Chochma. Right? It rises up to its root in Chochma. And then Malchut eventually transcends Chochma and reaches Keter. And that's why Malchut is also called Keter Malchut. Keter being the highest of the sefirot. So, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was doing, what the Rashbi was doing in the Zohar, and particularly in the Tikunei Zohar, is he was attempting to give us this light in a package deal so that when one studies it, one begins to either slowly or in some cases a little bit faster, but certainly not immediately, one begins to elevate one's way up through the channel until one reaches the beginning of the channel and eventually transcends the channel completely in Keter. That's what Rabbi Shimon was trying to do. And that's what he means when he says, "V'hamaskilim yazhiru kezohar rakia." The maskilim will shine with the Zohar, with the light, the illumination of the rakia of Yesod. Hamaskilim, those who attempt to grasp the wisdom of Chochma, will be illuminated from Chochma right down all the way through the path of the sefirot by Yesod, which is called the rakia, the heavens. So Malchut is illuminated by the heavens, which carry the light from Chokhmah all the way down through, and Malchut will be illuminated with that light. That is what the Zohar is coming along to do. That's what it's coming to bring us. Now again, as I mentioned right at the beginning, for a person to be able to achieve the level of light at its origin in Chokhmah, and how much more so that which transcends the light in Keter, for that he needs a personal guide. He needs a personal, either a soul alive or living, alive, or one that passed away to impregnate his soul, or he needs a teacher who's going to guide him at least some of the way along the way towards Chokhmah, towards that wisdom. That is what the Zohar attempts to do now. It doesn't attempt to do this, what it does. But in order to be able to understand how this works, in other words, again, Rabbi Shimon opened the channel. He didn't just open the channel. In other words, he opened the opening and there's nothing in it. He packed the channel full, right? The channel is packed full with this enlightenment, with this light, if you want to say, with information. But information is not yet knowledge. One has to know how to apply it. One has to know how to bring it down. One has to know how to find it within the city, within the world in which one lives. So that's the process of study, and that's what we're going to be doing when we're studying the Zohar, attempting to get to beyond the surface translation of the words to the essence of what this is essentially all about. In other words, the channel is not what we're looking for. It's what's in the channel, and what transcends the channel, ultimately, is what we're trying to achieve. Now, I can't promise you that I'll be able to just hold up a light and shine it upon each and every one of us. We're going to do the best that we can to plumb the depths of the teachings, hopefully not just on a surface level, in order to come, each one according to his ability, each one according to his experience, according to the effort they put in, according to the spiritual development of his or her soul, to come to some kind of deeper understanding of what it is that the Zohar is all about, and essentially what Kabbalah is all about, and essentially what divine knowledge ultimately is all about. Knowledge of the divine. So that's what our goal is, and hopefully at least there'll be a little bit of inspiration along the way, and we'll glean something out of it. Next week, I hope to go into the actual beginning of the beginning of Patach Eliyahu. We'll start actually explaining this. It's part of the introduction to the Tikunei Zohar, and then we'll go through the 70 teachings of the Tikunei Zohar. The Zohar is part of Kabbalah. It is the fundamental text of Kabbalah on which most of other Kabbalah is based, at least most of on other modern Kabbalah. Is there a book on Yosef Karo, Magid Misharim? There is, but it's in Hebrew. I don't believe that it's been translated into English ever. But it's called Magid Misharim. There's some amusing stories in there as well. His teacher would come and visit him, Rabbi Yosef Karo. His teacher would come and visit him on a regular basis every day. And one particular day he was late for his class with his spiritual teacher, and he told him that I understand you were late this time, and I understand why you were late and so on, but if you're late again you won't find me after that. I have other things to do. I'm not going to be waiting around for you. So That's what he said. It was an interesting thing. But there's a lot of very interesting teachings that he tells him, and it is available in Hebrew. I don't believe it's in English. But you can have a look around and you could see if, 1 second, Magid Meisharim. You can have a look there and see if you can find an English translation. There may be an English translation, I don't know. But if you do find one, just send me a link to it, and I will let you know if it's a decent translation or not, because a lot of these things have been translated by academics or by people who don't really know what they're talking about, and they translate it in a very sort of how shall I say, the translation is what's called in Hebrew miluli. They translate it like word for word. You know, it's not an explanatory translation. It's not a translation which will help you. For example, they call atik yomin. They just translate it as the ancient of days, which doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't mean anything. It's a whole concept in Kabbalah. Okay, so can you equate also? I'm not sure what you mean over here. Is there a book on Yosef Kara? Yeah, we just mentioned that. Is the Zohar part of Kabbalah? Yes, so we just explained that. Aaron the Baal Shem Tov, would we equate Zohar to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Yeah. Yeah, Zohar and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai are one and the same thing, essentially. Are the Hebrew letters of the Zohar, do the Hebrew letters of the Zohar have a particular force? The Hebrew letters altogether have a particular force. Do the Hebrew letters of the Zohar have a particular force? Yes. In other words, if you read the words of the Zohar, even without understanding them at all, they do have a certain potency. But obviously, if one understands them, or at least makes an attempt to understand, that is obviously much better. There is an expression, this is an expression by someone whose name was Rabbi Shalom Dovber of Lubavitch. He was the fifth rabbi, the fifth rebbe, the fifth spiritual leader of Chabad Lubavitch, the Hasidic sect. And in talking about the original text, which was written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, in talking about that text and trying to understand the depth of that text, he himself said, this Rabbi Shalom Dovber, the fifth Rebbe, said about the Tanya of the first Rebbe, our understanding of Tanya is like the understanding of a donkey braying at the moon, right? It doesn't know what the moon is, it just brays at the moon. So when we're talking about the Zohar, I would say probably the same thing. But nevertheless, we will try and get what we can out of it. There's a lot that can be gleaned. And of course, we're not going to be on the level of understanding Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and not even of his students, and not even of his students. But nevertheless, we'll try and get something out of it. And hopefully, over the weeks, we'll be able to glean at least some insight into what it is that the Zohar comes to teach us. Not Joseph Ben Caro, but Joseph Caro. Could be sometimes some people write it with a C. Right? Caro, or, sometimes with Joseph Caro or sometimes with a K. Right? Depends. So look at it like that. Magid Meisharim from Rabbi Yosef Caro. Okay. Any other questions? I think I'll stop recording now because